I try to listen and find something to learn from any conversation, anybody that I meet. And for example, something that sparked my curiosity and attention in this conversation we've been having is that I didn't know about the map and the South China Sea and the islands there and related to the Barbie movie. So after this conversation, I'm going to go read up on it so that when I'm talking about the Barbie movie with other people, which I'm being asked to do, I have this important piece of the context and we can talk about the politics as well. So, and that's not the only thing that I've learned, but that's just an example. I am so conscious of every single person having so much that I could learn from them. And I'm just looking for those opportunities. So thank you for that.
One, I think, is the recognition that in each of our lives and in each of our careers, we are called upon to do things that only we can do. That we are the best candidate for a particular job. Thinking long term for your life or for your career or for your company is one of those. Nobody can do it better. What we tend to do is fill up our time with things that other people should be doing or that we shouldn't just not be doing at all. And so we have to have the discipline to say, I'm going to do, for the most part, the things that only I can do that will make the best and brightest impact on the world or on my world. And I will stick to doing those things with some level of discipline. One of them is thinking time, high-level thinking time. So I have to have the recognition that only I can do that, and I have to do it. That's one. Two, for me, it works to write things down as opposed to just try to think them, to draw pictures, to get it out of my head and onto paper. And three is to have a buddy. I think that's one of the things that coaching is particularly useful for, is to have a sounding board, somebody who can hear you, somebody who can listen and ask you more questions and show you, wow, that's a really amazing idea. Tell me more about that. Tell me more so that I can participate in that. Let me share with you my feedback on that, because otherwise we're operating in a vacuum. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that we were successful as a company, because the three of us could feed off of each other. And I think that's why people look for coaches, because coaches can help them, just like a therapist can, just like an advisor can, just like a board of advisors or a board of directors, if properly used, can be a resource for people to do high-level thinking.
Well, I have to say that I'm grateful for my cultural background, because one of the things that I was taught very young, a part of Jewish tradition is that we question everything. You know, now I drove my teachers crazy. They hated me. You know, I always had to sit in the corner because I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe there's another way to look at this, you know. And they were the experts, so they didn't like my questioning. But I you know, it's a part of my, I mean, we had a value of learning and going to school, and always questioning. Is this truth or not? Is there another thing that we've understood, so maybe the truth has changed? So I think that always questioning what's missing. If somebody were to argue with me, what would they say? You know, if I were wrong, what would I be wrong about? You know, so I question. It's the questioning that helps me to learn. You know, not just, you know, the reading of books, and because a lot of times when you read articles or social media, you're just looking to confirm what you know. You know, so I need, and that's what coaches do. I disrupt your thinking. So, you know, it's going to be a little uncomfortable in my coaching. My third book was The Discomfort Zone, and I wrote that for leaders. You know, like, discomfort is a part of learning. That means we're letting go of what we knew, and that's uncomfortable. The brain doesn't like that, and to open to what else is possible. So I help other people I disrupt their thinking and make them a little uncomfortable to open them up. But again, it's what I had learned, that maybe I don't know what's the right way, and to question. So I think that's how we expand our learning, is to say, I don't know. What do you think? And take in other ways of seeing things. And then you can go back to your own way, but at least question it. Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to go way, way back, and mainly because I want people to realize that you can start in a very bad way and end up in an amazing place. And that certainly is my story. I was literally dropped in a trash can at 3 days of age by a mother who had hid my pregnancy during the entire time and was so ashamed and so worried that her parents would disown her that she hid the pregnancy. 3 days after the birth, having gone across from one state to another, she put me in a trash can. I was extracted from the trash can by a police officer, adopted to 2 wonderful parents who loved me, didn't have much money, so didn't have money to go to college, and was fortunate enough to get a scholarship from, I think, just hard work and really great luck. But from there, I went to graduate school and I studied clinical psychology, start working in a variety of different settings, and consulted for a little fish market in Seattle, Washington, where they throw fish. It's called the Pike Place Market. And it began the career that I now follow today, which is as a consultant, an author, and a speaker.
Yeah. Wow. My sense is it starts with us personally in terms of how quiet we can be inside of ourselves. Some people meditate. I meditate not as often as I would like, but I also have, we teach a lot of breathing techniques because breath is the fastest way to center. And so sometimes it's one breath that allows that quiet to show up in me. It's also practicing over decades the distinction between the voice of my ego, which is kind of clutchy, self-protective, you better, judgmental, and the voice of my higher self, my being, which is that intuitive voice that gives me genuine guidance. And so it's practicing the distinction between those two, and learning them over time. And so a lot of it is trial and error to be able to refine that, because it's decades. That voice has always been in me. I didn't always listen to it. I didn't even always recognize that it was there. And so a part of my own growth has been to determine how to get out of the way so that that voice can provide more guidance when I need it, which isn't always, but when I need it, it will be there. So part of it is practice. Part of it is also framing the question or the need that you're looking to get guidance for. And so the framing also has to be done with balance. It can't be frenetic. It can't be, if I'm attached or afraid, that is noise in the system that doesn't allow the space. It's not like you have to sit and meditate in order to get that intuitive voice. It can happen. It does happen, in life, in a moment. I'm looking for my glasses, walking through the house looking for my glasses. Oh, that's where they are. It just can happen. But that's after it's been refined a bit. And so part of it for me, I think you've sensed this in yourself, is knowing, I think we all have access to that voice. It's a matter of strengthening our ability to listen, to perceive, to receive. That's another really important word, is developing our ability to receive. Yeah, as opposed to do, I have to take action, I have to speak. How often are you silent so that you can receive, and silent in your head as well, which is what a lot of people meditate for, is to bring silence. So I think that's an important practice as well. And then it's trial and error. And one of the most important things is not be attached, because attachment is all ego, and that too will get in the way. And so for trial and error, I thought my glasses should be over here and they're not. Darn, that's just noise. That's just going to get in the way. And so being able to be accepting of your skill development while you're learning to fine tune it. I'm still fine tuning it. I'm just it's a lot more accessible to me now at this period of my life than it ever has been.
Sometimes we have to make hard decisions. It's a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. And the genius is in the middle. You have to have a balance for both. But if you've got a set of values that help you drive those decisions, you can make peace with yourself. I like to ask myself 3 questions around when I'm making a decision. Did I do what I thought was right? Did I do my best? So did I do what I thought was right? Did I do my best? If the answer to both of those is yes, then take a deep breath and make peace with your decision and move on.
Wow.
But you have to think about, did I do what was right? And that takes a lot of examination. Did I have the right information? Why do I believe what I believe? Brene Brown, I don't know if you know any of her work at all, but she has a great saying: in the absence of facts and data, we make up stories. And then those stories become our truth. So one of the things we have to do when we're making, a right decision is, do we have all of the information? And do I really believe this? Why do I believe what I believe?
It's first giving myself my moment of quiet and scheduling it, because it is hard, with the busyness of our life. But process my thinking, I first think about, okay, what did I have planned? What was in my plan? And what did I actually do? From that. But I look at that first to give myself a sense and a real honest look of, am I getting closer to what I want to achieve? And then I look beyond me and to think and say, what am I seeing in others, or seeing in the organization I'm in or the organizations I support, that I need to be adjusting, what I need to do, the services I offer, how I guide others. I put myself in the place of the people I serve. And so I think about what it is that they're dealing with and what is most important in their mind. And I process that in a way to say, how does this change what I'm going to be set up to do now?
Wow.
And so I look inward. I start there because I just need to get that out. That's me. I just, like I said, what did I set out to do, and how did I get, how I progress in that way? But then I focus on the people I serve. What are they set out to do? And how am I helping them achieve it? Am I focused on the right things? So there's the two components is the way I process inward, outward thinking to then give me the sense of I then go back to what I envision for myself. Yeah, I'll look at strategy, I'll look at plans, certainly, but am I doing what is in the interest of what I envision?
You know, it's such a good question, and it's hard because the context matters, right? And so when you get to one of the hardest things we learned this in Rising to Power that most executives struggle with is that when you get to the top of a very senior level, there's 20 versions of you out there, right? People have concocted multiple versions of you out there, and you can't control that. You know, leaders get frustrated when they say, "Oh my gosh, they said Ron said, Ron said, Ron said, Ron said." I never said any of that. But they're going to make up that you did, or they're going to tell people that you did. It's part of the job. For a leader to be true to themselves, true to their values, true to who they are. Of course, you have different audiences, right? You can't be the same everywhere, but you can be consistent, right? There's a difference between consistency and 20 versions of you. And over time, that takes a degree of self-mastery to know what degree of authenticity will keep me true to my values and keep me trusted by this audience, or help me connect over time to this audience, right? And it's a gauge, and you have to constantly calibrate the words you say, the gestures you use, the questions you ask. But I do believe, that there are some universal truths about authenticity. People all over the world, regardless of what the culture is, people know if you care.
Yes.
They know if you're telling the truth. They know if you genuinely believe in what you're saying, or if it sounds like, corporate speak. People know these things. It doesn't matter what culture it is, right? And so my job is to help people find the universal key versions of themselves that can play in those contexts.
It's a good question. Let me answer that in the way that look around your community. Who are the people who are making a positive difference? Is it a school teacher, a sports coach, a pastor, a community leader? Who's making that? Those are the people who are making life better for others. Draw inspiration from them. What can you learn from them, and what can you learn? How can you share that example? Is it valuable to emulate them, and how can you spread it around? So I think there's leaders all around us. I want to believe that we as humans are good-natured. Sometimes we mess up pretty badly, but I think part we try to act for the benefit of others, and so look around us for the goodness, the kindness, and the grace around us, because I want to believe, maybe I'm naive, but I think that there's more grace out there to help us become better people.
I always make every single decision in the best way possible for those that I'm surrounded with at the time. So when I made a decision to focus on credibility, I asked the most important person in my life, my wife, okay, this is going to bring this amount of activity. Or when I left Sun Microsystems, same thing. I asked the most important person in my life, hey, and she was pregnant at the time. Do you mind if this is something I do? I feel the need, right? So part of it is recognizing the potential of what may happen, if you try it. And I'm going to say you'll never get to yes if you don't ask. You'll never achieve your goals if you don't try. And what's the worst? So in the old days, we'll just say, maybe when I was growing up, people remembered you your entire life. You did one thing bad and they brought it to you 40 years down. that's silly. That doesn't work anymore. Maybe it does in some cultures, but that's not what I see. That's not the world I see. And I'd rather be known as a person who tried many times and failed than the person always reaching. Because the best way to think about this, really the best way to think about this, and you've probably heard this many times, is when you're sitting on your deathbed, you're literally just trying to imagine yourself in a hospital and you've got 3 hours left, and maybe even 3 good hours. Like you just know that something's going to happen. When you're talking to whatever family you have around you, so imagine you don't have any family around you. There's nobody there. Does that make you feel? Right? Imagine you have family, but they didn't come because they thought you weren't that important to them. How does that make you feel? Are you ever going to say, I wish I had $1 more, or whatever the denomination is, right? It's, you know, so it's the things that you may ever say to yourself, I regret not having tried. That one is so much worse than trying and not succeeding, because everything you do is a lesson. Everything, you know, you fail, that's great. You learn something. You don't, when you're a kid and you learn how to ride a bike, if most kids, I don't know any kids who get on the bike and just ride, they fall and then they adjust. When you first start walking, how many times does a kid fall before they actually learn how to walk, right? So this is, for some odd reason, when we go to school, that ability to be salespeople, to be marketers, to be customer service, that ability to learn and grow and fumble, that gets beaten out of us. And it's wrong, actually. It's just not the right way to teach.
Absolutely. But it takes time, and it takes, you've got to repeat it again and again and again. It's, it's not like, oh, I've switched that off and now we're on the other one. Our brain doesn't work like that. But if we do continue to be aware and then look at what is the different thought, eventually that becomes the dominant thought, which is, what we're working towards, isn't it? But, so much of what drives what we do, we're unaware of. And actually even getting curious. And I think often people can be really judgmental about themselves. And, bad me for having a fixed mindset about creativity or whatever it is. And that's not helpful. It's much better to have, what I call compassionate curiosity. Like, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder why I have that. Why is that? And is that really true? I don't think it is. So, and actually it removes a lot of the negative emotional charge if we can be compassionate and curious when we look at some of the thoughts that go on in our head.
A lesson Simon taught to me that a mentor of his taught him, which is 2/3 of an answer is better than an answer and a half. Which I love, and it's not something I'm naturally good at. I could be quite good at rambling and going on and sharing an answer and a half, but I love this notion of talk less, say more. And so Simon has really helped me both in my own writing as well as my speaking. That to say as few words as possible to get the message across, such that people are interested to hear more and ask more. So that's one. And then the other is, Simon is very open in admitting and saying that he is not a perfect leader and no such thing exists. And so I've really learned that the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to make progress. And that, Simon's organization, and as I'm building my own organization as well, we must live the message we preach from the inside out.
Let's put it this way. If you want to be an expert at something, and if that's fine, then you need to go deeply. For example, I was a classical guitar player. I played the guitar. I practiced a lot. I focused a lot on being good at learning those pieces, that playing well. So I got good at it. But that's a skill. And usually expertise is down to being able to do some particular thing extremely well, extremely quickly, extremely effectively. Now that's fine and that's great, but I don't think that that applies so much to creativity. Creativity would be more about, look, you can do it this way and you may be even quicker or better, right? So then the person changes and applies and practices and goes deeply into that way, and maybe they get better, you know, maybe not, but it's different. So it's an interesting question that you asked. I think that if you want to be creative, generally, you should go very widely over a number of different things. Now, with my executive clients, I ask them to look at some area of knowledge that they don't know anything about, that they are completely novice at. And I ask them to do this every 2 or 3 months. Now, it's not just random. I ask them to you know, something, we've all got something like this. It's something, you know, I'm really interested in this. And if only I just had a little bit of time off work, I'd really get into this. It's really interesting. For example, I'm at the moment, because I do this myself, I'm very interested in Japanese history of the samurai period. Now, I didn't know anything about that, and it's not immediately applicable in any way to my work as a coach. But if you go into something like that, first of all, it's fascinating. And secondly, you pick up ideas about how people thought and what they did that's very different to what you're doing. And I guarantee that you will find something in there that you can apply. You think, oh, they did it like that. They thought like that. That's interesting. Never thought of that. I wonder if I did it, you know, like that, this way. So what you're basically doing is you're spreading very wide, and you're finding something that is going to be helpful for you in your main work, as well as becoming, you know, generally, it's very interesting anyway, and generally better informed. So I'm very much about doing a lot of different things and allowing that information, and you never know what's going to strike you, to kind of get into you and center you, and then that can come out in some very interesting and unusual and unexpected and creative ways.
Such a beautiful question and mission, and I love that you and your wife are pursuing this together in relationship. So love the question. What's been critical for me is giving myself permission to take the time to think. So figuring out, and actually writing the book really locked this in for me, figuring out how wonderful the hour or the 2 hours is in the morning where I just say I don't take meetings. I'm not available. I haven't checked email. I'm sitting on the couch with my journal next to the puppy, with a cup of coffee, asking myself questions. And so the space and time and permission is one. The second one is the power of exploratory writing. So here I'm going to recommend Allison Jones' book, Exploratory Writing. And I've learned so much from her about all you do is set a timer for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. We all have 6 minutes. No way we don't have, everyone can find 6 minutes in the day, I think. Ask a question, and her book is loaded with prompts. And then just start writing on a piece of scratch paper. It doesn't need to be, don't make it a pretty journal that makes it too precious, but just a piece of scratch paper. Reflect on see where the pen takes you. Don't do it at the computer. There's something special about writing on paper. and use your writing as a way to explore your thinking, as opposed to using your writing as a way of documenting what you know or what you understand about the world, but use it as exploration. Such a powerful tool for thinking.
There are two things that limit your curiosity. One is certainty about your own advice. So when somebody comes to you with a problem, say Vivian comes to me with a problem, she goes, Michael, this is what's hard for me. If I think to myself, I know exactly what's going on here, I know exactly what her problem is, let me tell her what I think she should do. There's no space for curiosity there. So I think that certainty, that overconfidence, that arrogance, that you know what's going on in that other person, can blunt your curiosity. And that's why I say, you know, the behavior that I think is important is, can you stay curious a little bit longer? It's not saying never give advice. It's just saying, ask a few more questions before you give advice, because it means that you'll more likely be solving the real problem rather than just the first problem that shows up. And it's also a chance to have that other person grow and figure out some stuff themselves. So, you know, when your daughter comes to you, or doesn't come to you, but she makes a mistake, and there's a part of you that just wants to tell her what to do, to give her advice, as you said. You may still want to give her advice, and that's great, because that's part of what a parent does. Is a parent teaches children how to live their lives. But if you stay curious a little bit longer, so when your daughter comes to you and says, hey mum, hey dad, this is really hard for me right now. If you say, so what's the challenge here for you? Or what's hard about this for you? And then what else? What else is hard about this for you? And what else is hard about this for you? So what's really hard about this for you? The real challenge here for you. Your daughter is going to learn more about herself and the situation she's in. You're making her think about it. And that immediately is a victory, because she's getting smarter. She's creating new neural pathways, aha moments. And then if you go, okay, so I think you're right. I think this is the challenge. I've got some ideas around how you could fix this, but before I tell you my ideas, you know, what's your first idea on how you'd solve this? Great, I love that. Good idea. And you go, what else? What else could you do? You go, this is wonderful. What else could you do? And then you ask, is there anything else you could do? And all you've done is you've just delayed giving your advice by 5 minutes. But now you know more accurately what the problem is. Now you know what ideas she already has, so you don't want to offer up redundant ideas that, I mean, if you're like, let me give you my best advice, and she's already thought of it, well, then neither of you win. But now you can go, okay, this is great. I understand the problem. I understand the solutions you've already got. Let me give you one or two other possibilities for you. And she's become smarter, feels more empowered, more in control, more ownership in her own life. You work less hard. You don't feel responsibility for solving your daughter's life for her, but you get to go, my job is to support her, to try and make her as smart and as capable and as resilient as possible. And just giving her advice doesn't help with that so much. And, you know, that extra 5 minutes of investment turns out to have great rewards for you and for your daughter.
That one's hard, because like I said, I'm more of a snap decision maker, and it is something that I've had to train myself to do. Basically, I think of little triggers, I think of questions that people ask, and I say, you know what, I just need to stop for a second, and I need to engage a different way of thinking And how I do it, I'm not really sure if I can really pinpoint how I do that, but I think just the act of just stopping, taking a deep breath, trying to calm myself down, that's when the thinking starts. And that might be different from everybody. And so you might need to find your own way to realize how you need to just stop and think before you react. But for me, mine is like, I just have to like, I'll stop, stop, assess, figure out what's going on, and then make a decision at that point.
Wow.
How do I make myself think?
Yes.
Do you know, there's a really interesting fellow, I'll send his name on to you. He's a Hollywood producer. I can't remember his name straight away, but he has a brilliant video. I'll send it to you.
Sure, please.
But what he does, and he's done it since he left school, is that he meets a different person for 20 minutes every day. And it doesn't matter, it's a bit like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what they're doing, he just meets them and talks to them. Every day he does that, and he has learned so much from being open to people, for a short period of time, every single day. It's kind of like a practice he has. I'd say to his name, I had it as part of my course, but I think even what we're doing now, what happens is, once you begin to talk to people, things happen in your brain that just open up avenues that won't open if you don't talk to people. It's just as simple as that. So sometimes what you got to do is you've got to talk to similar-minded people about creating things or doing things, but also you have to be able to talk to anybody. And if they're negative, and just what are you negative about? What is it, etc. You don't have to stay with it all the time, but that you understand them a little bit. But also, by you listening to that person, they might act, if you really listen to somebody, they might actually change their thinking themselves by you listening to them. Because they get a chance to let it out, and then they hear it, not in a very angry way, but they just hear it because you're listening to them. You're not arguing with them, you're listening to them. It's a different concept. And I would think a lot of our capabilities, we just forget about them because we just don't let ourselves hear other people or hear ourselves talking to other people. Even now when I'm talking to you, I'm getting ideas that I didn't have a half an hour ago. It's great. And you know what? I have a terrible habit, and I used to do it a lot, but I don't do it so much now because I don't travel so much. I used to love getting into a taxi and talking to the person driving the taxi. Some people don't like doing that. I love doing that because I will always ask them about their background, where they're from, what they do. And I've never met as many interesting people going to meetings as I've met taxi people driving me to the meeting. They're often far more interesting than the people at the meetings because they've come there in so many different ways. It's great.
Oh, that is beautiful. I love that question. I think that part of good thinking is lots of learning. Like, good thinking is informed by lots of different information that we can bring together. So I think a really important key to good thinking is learning in diverse places. I think another really important key to good thinking is reflection, both individually and with others. Like when we can think about our thinking, when we can do double loop learning, when we can reflect on what we're thinking, rather than just accepting our thinking, pushing back on ourselves and challenging ourselves individually. And I think when we can reflect with others, like I think sometimes good thinking is informed when we hear ourselves say something to a friend, right? And we're like, I'm not even sure I knew I thought that until it came out of my mouth, right? Or the friend who helps us and pushes us and asks us really good questions. So I think that that reflection, that asking questions about our own thinking and asking questions of others about our thinking are really important elements of how we improve our thinking over time.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny. It was a conversation, and the conversation went something like this. I was talking to my husband. I said, "Hey, when you can do a job, but if you start to think, should I be doing this job?" And he said, "Well, what are we really talking about? What do you want to do?" And I said, "I love my job, but I think I can make a bigger impact." And he said, "Well, that's exactly what you should do." Wow. And so we started planning for it. So it was just that easy. My husband is a biggest supporter, and I think that we do that for each other's careers. But he could see that, I lit up when I started talking about that kind of impact, right? That was where my heart was. And the hardest part was leaving that job and saying goodbye to the team and making that decision. But on the other side of it, it was the best decision. And I think it's the best model for them too. As a leader, I think, and I coach individuals like this all the time, sometimes they feel stuck, or they feel like they have to stay. They're very loyal to company, and they're loyal to their team, especially, right? Because they've invested so much time in building this team and building this department or function or whole organization, and they don't want to leave anybody behind if they decide to go, right? Because they've helped so many people, and they want to be there for them. And that's how I was feeling. I felt this big tension. When I made the decision at the family level, that was easy, but the hard part was, how do you decide to leave? What does that look like? How do you do it in the right way, right? How do you prepare others to be okay, and to be okay with, leaving all of the things that you left and that could be undone, right? Because I think that's another thing. We do all this work and we hope that it sticks. But that's a fear too that leaders have when they leave. And the biggest thing that I thought was, I want to be an example for all of the people that I've ever led to follow what you want to do. And if I don't leave, then I'm actually doing them a disservice, right? Because I'm not leading by example. I'm not role modeling that. And making tough decisions is part of leadership. You have to do that. You have to show up and make those tough calls, and especially in your own interest, right? Because often, especially female leaders in my experience, we show up for so many people, and sometimes we're the last ones that we show up for, right? And especially at senior levels, once you're in the C-suite, there's not a lot of levels. Sometimes you don't have mentors internally. You might not have a sponsor internally. And so you're the one that needs to advocate for your own career, right? And so as we decided to do that, I realized I have to be the advocate for this next phase in my career, and showing up for myself, for my family, to do that was the best thing. And hindsight, I'm so glad that we made that decision. And it was the best. It was the best decision for me personally, for our family, and probably for the organization too, because I also could have stayed in that job, but I wasn't 100% all in, right? And if I had this other, inkling, nudging calling to do something else, if I would have stayed, I wouldn't have been the best leader in that role and in that organization at that time. So I think it was the best decision for everybody. But I think most importantly, it kind of modeled this idea of, lead with what you believe in and be your own advocate for yourself. And sometimes that means making tough decisions, but it is the right thing to do.
There's a really, really good book that I recommend to everybody, and it's called Into the Magic Shop. It's called Into the Magic Shop, and it's written by an American neurosurgeon, a brain surgeon called James Doty, D-O-T-Y. My favorite book, and he tells the story, and he had a similar background to me I had family problems in my family. He had a broken family. His father was an alcoholic. And so he came from a broken family. True story. And he went into a magic shop in California in the 1960s. And this old lady could see something in him. She could see, as I think you kind of maybe could see in me, that I'm about honesty and ethics and purpose. She could see that in him, but he couldn't see it in himself. And she said to him, if you come back for 6 weeks, I'll teach you magic, right? And he did. And she didn't teach him magic, but she taught him the 4 key attributes of living a fulfilling, purpose-driven, happy life. And they are, the 2 first ones are easy, right? You need to find ways to relax your mind, to look after your mind. Our mind is a tool, right? We need to use it, and we need to be careful about it, and we need to nurture it, and we need to feed it positive thoughts, and keep toxic thoughts out of it, and nurture our mind, right? We need to protect our mind, right? Because our minds are plastic, you know, they can become toxic and difficult, so we need to mind them. The second thing is we need to look after our bodies. We need to exercise, we need to eat good things, we need to drink lots of water, we need to mind ourselves, right? The 4th thing, I'll skip on the 3rd thing, the 4th thing is most people then think, right, I'm going to set my goals and my journey in life. But the crucial thing that 95% of people don't do, and that stops you, I think, from being happy, is get critically honest with yourself. Until you get totally honest with yourself about who you are and what you want to do and how you want people to regard you and how you want people to say when they're standing around on your deathbed, what do you want people to say about you at that point, right? Unless you do that, I think a lot of people are going to feel disconnected and not fully engaged in this life. And that is the key trait that people like Marshall Goldsmith and the people you've interviewed, everybody's been on this journey. We've got to a place in our lives where either through tragedy or trauma or something else, where we thought, right, what do I really want out of this life? What's my purpose in life? And for me, yes, I make money out of what I do, but my purpose is to help. My purpose is to gain knowledge and to help. And money can come in. My purpose is not to make money, right? If you're chasing money, you're not going to be happy, right? But if you're chasing a good purpose, the money will follow and you'll feel fulfilled. So it's getting honest with yourself and having a purpose.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think you should write a book on that subject. Just collect all of that, because you're right. Our capacity to think is diminishing. You know, our ability to focus and attend to things for any length of time. I mean, we just are so now programmed to multitask and jump from thing to thing. It's really hard. So, so a couple of things that I know I do for myself is my thinking time tends to be earlier in the day. If I get up quite early, so before the rush of the day begins, I've got a little bit of that quiet time for contemplation. But the other thing that I will do is time box thinking. So if I know I need to figure something out, I will put it on the calendar and set a timer for 30 minutes. And I won't allow myself, and you know, when you know there's an end point, when you know the buzzer will go off and you can move on to something else, there's something about that creates more of an appetite for focusing, at least for myself. And so when I know I've got this 30 minutes, I can be heads down. I won't look at email. I won't look at my texts. I can just figure this out. There's that level of intensity that I can bring to it, I find is much greater than if I just, you know, let myself lollygag around all day trying to do the same thing. And then the other thing, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about this till you mentioned it, but we just came back from a vacation. We went to Africa for a couple of weeks and got to go on safari. And before going to Africa, I created a thinking list. So the things that had been kind of in the back of my mind that I hadn't been able to attend to, that required some creative juices, I put together a list of things just to think about while I was away. So it wasn't like heavy to-dos, you know, I wasn't creating any deliverables, but I had to think about how I wanted to approach a few things. it was interesting because in the space that we had over the course of the vacation, there were moments where I was able to come to conclusions about things. And I think I had 8 things on my thinking list. I probably came back with 5 that I was able to cross off.
Wow.
Your question was about like what started this and the numbing depression, and it was just being on this hamster wheel of chasing goal after goal after goal, to finally be able to reflect and go backwards and be like, am I doing these things because it's feeding my soul and it's really what I want to do, or am I writing books and am I being on the board of multiple nonprofits, living in this place that I don't want to live, and all this type of stuff, and trying to do the things that I think I'm supposed to do. And that was the thing. I was just doing the things that we're taught to do, right? Be successful in business, donate your time to nonprofits, which is all great stuff and everything. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy it, but now my life is going in a different direction that really is about feeding my soul first, then looking at my life obligations, which includes work, versus, you know, we talk about work-life balance, and that's something I was trying to achieve at the time. And if you try to achieve work-life balance, just by the very nature of the phrase work-life balance, you're trying to achieve work and make that the priority, then look at your life afterwards. Then from there, where's your connection to the greater mystery of this human experience, right?
Hedonic treadmill is what it's called.
Okay.
And I think a lot of, if you look it up, you'll find there's quite a bit written about it in the field of psychology, and positive psychology in particular. And it just means that, you know, we're always pursuing money, power, and fame if we're on the hedonic treadmill. And those things provide short-term rewards. And if you look at the biochemistry of that, you know, they produce, well, there are like 100 neurotransmitters. So this is a bit of an oversimplification, but it's true that when we're chasing external rewards, whether it's money, power, status, produces dopamine. Dopamine has been called the molecule of more.
Molecule of more.
Because we always want more. And let me just explain that a little bit more. Because dopamine it's an excitatory chemical that, you know, it speeds up our heart. It makes us feel good, right? It's a nice thing. But it only lasts for like 30 minutes. It doesn't last long. Its effects are very, you know, they're short term. And it leaves us wanting more. You know, a lot of addictions are, you know, they're addictions because they're affecting what physicians call the dopaminergic reward system. And, you know, you want more. And the other aspect of it is the more you satisfy that need, the more you burn out the dopamine receptors in your brain, so that you actually need more of the same chemical or activity to produce the same positive feelings. Wow. So, you know, your body gets accustomed to that, and you actually need, say, more alcohol or more drugs, or more potent drugs, or more quantity of drugs to produce the same effect. That's what addiction does. And so now the healthy leaders, you will see in them that they are stabilized by supportive relationships. They have good relationships at home, outside of work, that they're very protective of, and they have good relationships in the workplace.
Hopefully you've seen it a little bit today, is I don't take myself too seriously. I understand that I know a lot about a very few things and almost nothing about almost everything else. So I'm humble because it's because I always have something to learn. And there was a period in my life in my 30s that I was pretty arrogant. I really thought I was smart. I was the CEO of a multinational company, and then I realized, no, not really. I'm not that I'm not that smart. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. So my goal is, why not be friendly and kind and gentle and respectful and treat everyone as a teacher because they are, and I mean everyone as a teacher because they are. And me trying to show off doesn't do any good for anybody, and especially not me. I want to be kind and easy to work with and genuine and authentic because that's the kind of person I am, and I want to be that way with my clients.
So I think that what we often do as human beings, we are creatures of judgment. We judge ourselves, we judge others, we judge the situation. And there's a big difference between judgment and discernment. So the important piece is to be able to discern, to understand what has played out, to understand our behaviors, and to learn from that. So what is the gift or opportunity that I can derive from my actions? Although I'm not proud of my actions, or I wish I could do a redo, what can I actually learn instead of replaying that tape over and over again in my head? So letting go of the judgment and moving more swiftly into the gift or the opportunity. I think the key is being able to identify when you're in that mindset. So quickly noticing, I'm in judgment right now. Or I have another saboteur, that hyperachiever, that perfectionist voice that's telling me I need to get better or better. Use that as a warning sign. Something's not right here. And then move into, what can I learn from this? What is the opportunity? What is right?
What do you need to do to get a compliment? No one is going to give you a compliment for doing what was expected. If you follow the procedure and you do the standard, you're not going to get a compliment for that. You're supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So the only way to get a compliment is if you do something that was unexpected or that was a little bit beyond expectations or that was a surprise. Now, how are you going to get your staff to take that action? First, you've got to encourage them to come up with new ideas. Like, well, what if we did this? Should we try that? Have we thought about this? Have we ever done that before? Hey, what do you think of this idea? Not every idea is a good idea. So it would be nice if, for example, the team came up with 20 ideas. Then they could say 10 of these are stupid ideas. Okay, good. Then they could say of these 10 ideas, 5 of these ideas look like they could be really good ideas. Let's work on them. You know what? 3 of these ideas, we should do it. But what was the most leading indicator? Number of new ideas. If you don't have enough new ideas churning from your people, then you're not going to get enough new actions. Then you're not going to get enough compliments. Then you're not going to get higher scores. Then you're not going to make the money in the final indicators. So when we say measure what really matters, the leader is the one who needs to be asking their people for more ideas. And you can't just say, give me an idea. You've got to be a leader of that conversation.
Yeah, so I was about 12 years old and I started my first business. Now, let's go back even 2 years before that. I was just 10. I started doing card tricks. And I graduated into doing other kinds of magic tricks. And by the age of 12, I booked my first birthday party magic show, which turned into be quite a business over the next few years while I was in school. And I remember the very first show that I did, it was after school on a Wednesday afternoon. My mom picks me up from school, drops me off at this house. I go in and I entertain a bunch of little screaming 6-year-old kids, okay? I had fun, they had fun, and I walked out with a whopping $16. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but back then it was a lot. Now, I came home and my mom asked me, what are you going to do?
after dinner tonight? And on a typical school night, the answer is homework. But she says that will be after you write a thank you note to the people that just paid you $16 to perform for their kids. I thought, wow, that's a great idea. So that was kind of like my first lesson in customer service. And it's such common sense, just show appreciation. Then my dad said, that's a good idea, but, take it a step further. In a week, call the parents, thank them again on the phone, and then ask them, what'd you think of the show? Can you give me any feedback? Wow. And he said, get really specific. Ask them what their favorite tricks were in the magic show. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. And he says, what you're listening for is not just the tricks they like, but the tricks they don't talk about. Because if you do this enough times, you'll notice a pattern. And whatever people don't talk about, get rid of it and replace it with something that people will talk about. Now, I had no idea that was called getting feedback, voice of the customer, and of course, process improvement. So at 12 years old, not knowing what you actually call these things, they're pretty darn good business strategies that are actually applicable to just about any and every business today, whether it's B2B, B2C, retail, even the government needs to pay attention to that idea.
I think it's there's a little bit from this woman who I interviewed in my book, Vivian, who used to work for General Motors Foundation, and I think when she told me what made her keep going, and it's that I realized I didn't have to be, that I was still good enough, and that I did deserve to be in the room. And so seeing them, I'm like, well, I deserve to do that. I should be able to do that. I can do that. So there was a lot of that thinking to when I was younger, that, well, why wouldn't I be able to do that? I didn't also know when I didn't know. So I think that was a little bit of a good thing, is I didn't know, and I didn't know how the system worked, and I didn't know. So being a little bit naive and not having family in the business, I think was, in a way, good. And a lot of people, there's a lot of nepotism where people open doors that way. I didn't have that opportunity, but in a way, I think it was good that, it just kept me going. I did have a family member, an aunt who I loved, a great aunt who I loved dearly, say, well, why would she want to do that? And I think that might be the fuel that really, if you scratch back, well, why? And it was said, my dad repeated it to me, well, why would she want to do that? And it wasn't said in a positive way. And that's where it's like, I think there was a little bit of that, that little bit of fuel that said, well, of course I'm going to do that. Like, why wouldn't I do that? And that's what gets you going sometimes. Sometimes people are cheering you on, and sometimes it's just like, no, why would you want to do that job? But I just truly did. And I think that was a little bit of the rocket fuel to make me go further, or maybe a little bit of the kindling to make me go and do that job.
Well, it's very similar to the advice I gave your mother about being happy. If you want to set aside time to think, you have to set aside time to think. And what happens is we get so busy doing stuff that we don't set time aside to just think. So one of the things I try to do is just set time aside to do nothing but think.
Again, presence, right? You don't need to walk physically in the forest. You can look at a photograph and be sensually engaged with that, right? And it can offer a calming effect. A 30-second meditation can be as good as a 30-hour meditation. It's your completeness when you're done and how focused you are while you're there, And so when we're looking at this concept of presence and thinking, start with self. Once you give positive reinforcement, give you self-love, you start giving love, whether you consciously are aware of it or not. And the more you give out, the more people receive it. The more, and when they return that back to you, you have this massive amount of love coming back at you. So, you know, it's start with self, and that's not being selfish, right? You start with self and love yourself, and Terry, I'm okay. You know, I'm doing okay today. And, you know, when it's a rough day, I say, I'm learning a lot today. And when it's a really terrific day, guess what? I'm still learning. Because in this life, once we get present with the fact that there isn't any good or bad, there's just a situation, there's choice, there's presence, and they're not good or bad, they are learning opportunities. So, you know, if you successfully pass an examination in school, okay, you learned the knowledge that it took to pass that test, and you correctly filled out the test. So now you know how to do that test. The same thing is when you try something in your business or whatever that you're working on, and in old terms, you failed at it. Great. That's a super learning experience. There's nothing wrong with failure, okay? It's when you quit and go home and don't do anything else. That's really when you've stopped to exist. It's like the flower. It's gorgeous until it begins to, it's reached its maturity, and then it starts to die, right? We just don't go to the die part. We keep going. We change physically, but we keep going. And there's a point in time where we're going to end too, or ideally. They're working really well on doing stem cell research to rebuild your bodies. But, you know, day to day, it really boils down to this. I'm okay. I love me. And I love those around me. You know, there's an indigenous universal word. It's 3 syllables. Ta-hesh-da. Ta-hesh-da means family. Everything is family. My desk, all of you, this computer, the air I breathe is family. Now, family, you put up with more with family than you do with others, okay? So everything and everybody is family. Your mindset changes, and you're less likely to go finger pointing and making divides. So that's my thoughts for that one.
For me, honesty is paramount. It's the most important thing for human beings. If we're not honest, not just with others, but also with ourselves, we don't really have a real identity, right? And honesty is something that all human beings struggle with, right? We all struggle with being 100% honest. Have either of you been 100% honest in your lives? Probably not, because we're human beings, right? At the end of the day, we are all going to die, right? I have to say it, like, we're all going to die one day. And when you're on your deathbed, right, all you have is your reputation. You can't take money with you, right? You can't take, you can only sleep in one bed, right? And so all we have is our reputation. When you think about it, when you strip everything away, our reputation is so important. I'm getting very passionate about this because it's really important. And if you're, when you think about it, I'll finish on this. If you are 100% honest, or as honest as you can be, nobody can get at you. Nobody can, right? They might think they can. So honesty and ethics and the truth are paramount.
How have you been growing your ability to think over the years, though?
What a great question. God, I love that question. I have to think about it. You know, I'll speak as a developmental psychologist and as a grandma. Well, I'll tell you a little story. So the other day I was in the car with my 4-year-old grandson. His name is Henry. And Henry was looking out the window at some trees that had no branches on the bottom part. And he said, "Those trees have no branches. Is there a reason for that?" And I was so excited, I practically lifted off the seat. I was like rushing to write it down in my notebook. because it was a reminder that very young children, and this I know from my own research, because this is what I do research on as a scientist, young children love to think, and it feels good to think. It feels as good to think as it does to skip or eat or laugh. It just feels good to think. And we unfortunately, the school system often makes kids think they don't like to think. Instead of a cookie, it feels like a vitamin, a medicine, but it's like a cookie. It feels good. And so it feels good to me. I think I'm lucky because I ended up on a path that made that a very obvious part of my everyday life. So writing is, in my experience, writing is the best way to push myself to think, because often I have an idea, I think it's such a great idea, and I sit down to write about it in my new book, and then I write it out and I think it's not a great idea. I can see in the sentences it's a stupid idea, and then I have to start all over. Or I have an idea and then I think, wait a minute, but I have no proof that this is true, or I haven't made an argument that would convince anyone else, and then I realize I have more thinking to do. So for me, writing has been a way to push my thinking. But then I work in a college and I have all these smart young people around me who ask me questions in class, and then I think, wait a minute, whoops, I need to think about that. It's like talking to you. You ask a question, I think, oh, I never thought of that, let me think. So partly it's looking for partners, people to talk to, and wanting to talk to them about interesting things, because besides writing, talking to other people is a way to get your own thinking to be better. And then I would say that I live in a country where there's been incredible political divide. I mean, and my politics I have very strong politics, and there are a lot of people in the last, I'll say, 7 years that I've disagreed with very vehemently. And what that's taught me is how important it is to keep pushing yourself to change your mind. I won't change my mind about everything. There are certain things that have happened in this country in the last 7 years. I know this is probably not what I'm supposed to talk about on your show, but there are things that have happened that I won't change my mind about because I thought they were too terrible, that have to do with human rights and human dignity and equity. But it's also taught me how many people lost the capacity, maybe they never had it, to think about information and other people's point of view and reconsider their own ideas. And so that's another thing that I teach more than I used to. So we were laughing yesterday because my sisters were teasing me that I say all the time in the middle of a discussion, do you think I'm right or do you think I'm wrong? Or do you think I'm wrong about that? And I was saying I do that more than I should. It's like a bad habit to say that because I want my students to realize that I'm old, I'm 64. I still want to be able to ask people if they think I'm wrong. And so, you know, I'm very lucky because I work in a college, so I get to be talking about ideas and thoughts all the time, and I read all the time. But even if you don't, even if you work in a garden or you're in a kitchen cooking, or you, and especially if you teach, you find a way, like, to keep questioning yourself and asking, am I wrong? What would make me wrong? Because I think that helps people be thinkers. And then I wish more people realized that it's more like a cookie and less like a vitamin.